Scott Smith from OneShot. Thanks, Scott, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Delighted to be here. What better way to spend a Friday afternoon?
Nice. I can think of a few, but this is also good. But yeah, appreciate it. Look, I think what we're kind of interested to know is a couple of things. One is like a bit about your journey from where you started your career to currently being at Lacework, and a bit about your prospecting whilst managing a pipeline. Those are some really interesting things. I guess a good intro will be an intro to yourself and a bit about Lacework and what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and summarize my life story in 30 seconds, but I've been in sales ultimately about 10 years now, majority of that time in tech and SaaS. As you mentioned, started off back at a company called Danwood as a BDR/SDR, hammering the phones, booking tons of appointments per day. And then really just incrementally work my way up. I think the bigger milestones were probably my few years at Twilio when I joined as one of the first hires in EMEA, and now there are about 8,000 people globally. And then spent some time at Amazon Web Services before moving on to Lacework. And again, we're doing a lot of fun things in the cybersecurity space and really trying to transform security in the cloud. So yeah, really exciting times here at Lacework.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen the news and the case studies and the fundings. There's like hyper growth gets thrown around a lot, but you guys really are on that like upwards trajectory, and great tech as well that backs it all up.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on.
Just trying to understand then, like, you've been in sales for a while and you're a big advocate of prospecting. How, like, talk to me about, Danwood, how you were prospecting there to how you're prospecting now. What are the similarities? Are there stuff you're just not doing anymore? Or is there stuff you've increased? It would just be good to understand that transition, that period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, back when I started out, sales engagement tools and the tech was almost non-existent, certainly nowhere near as mature as it is today. So really my technology was my laptop and a phone. And so pretty much prospecting looked like either, just absolutely hammering it in terms of volume, hundreds of calls a day, and also just getting out there, actually going and knocking on doors, walking in offices, and trying to just make it happen. And so really a bit of a kind of hustle culture or hustle mentality. And really either you thrived in that or you didn't. But to this day, I still feel like it's been a massive part of my success, because after you live in the trenches in that way to start with, everything else feels a lot easier after that. So I think it was a blessing in disguise. As we kind of fast forward or move through the years, I think one of the biggest differences is just becoming a lot more methodical and thinking about how I can drive the best return on investment on my time. And so when it comes to prospecting, now things, I tend to typically focus on tiering things. So having a kind of tier 1 gold standard, tier 2, which is kind of partly personalized, partly automated, and then a third tier, which is a lot more automated. But in that first tier, that's really where the personalization, the messaging becomes a lot more important. And then just kind of balancing it out again to give myself, use the automation to have more reach and things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, you don't have to, it's a bad model effectively to do highly personalized for everyone, because otherwise you'll never get around to doing your activities. So how do you typically decide on those tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3? Is that from a like highest propensity to buy? How are you kind of deciding those kind of tiers?
Yeah, well, it definitely ties into that. So you might have heard of ideal customer profile, right? ICP. And so, I often encourage or I try and look out for, 3 to 5 ICP criteria that I can say, if these prospects or customers have these ingredients, the propensity to buy is very high, right? And so if they've got all 5, that would typically warrant that they go into the tier 1. And then if they maybe got 3 of the 5, that's probably a tier 2. And then 1 or 2 of the 5 is tier 3. So, if we've got a tier 1 that's got all 5 of those ingredients, that's given me a ton of momentum to say, these guys are probably buying what I'm selling.
Yeah. And then specifically for tier 1 then, so we've kind of got, you've identified, okay, they've kind of got a few of the check marks here. This looks like a really good account. What's your process from there? Are you targeting 5 people, 1 person, 10 people? And then what's your typical kind of like process there? Is it different per person, or be good to kind of get that kind of understanding?
Yeah, so I tend to start off by having some form of a hypothesis about that account, right? Understanding what are the moving parts, who are the key stakeholders, and I'll often pick out then 2 key contacts. And I've got a big focus on getting to up to 8 touch points with a contact before kind of moving on to the next one. So I'll start with the couple and then spend a lot of time on the hypothesis, understanding what compelling events are happening within the account. Are there areas of interest that I can map to? And then go across my 8 different touch points using different channels that always tie into a compelling event or an area of interest. And that's given me a great success rate because there is that level of personalization, there's a level of research, but at the same time, not ignoring the fact that you do need to have multiple touch points with a prospect, typically to drive some form of next action.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, I like that. It's kind of 8 gives you that broad set. I think you mentioned that it's not necessarily just one channel that's going to fit all 8. It's going to be different based on that person. And then on the, like, this is always a hot topic, and personalization. Because you'll have certain salespeople who'll spend half a day writing 1 invite, or you'll get someone else doing the complete opposite and, just spray and pray type mentality. Sure. What type of quick or medium term, like, personalization tactics do you use or recommend? Is there one that works really well for you? Like, what do you kind of do when you're looking to personalize?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's no magic secrets, right? I'm looking at LinkedIn profiles, I'm running searches and things like that. And part of the reason I came on this podcast is actually OneShot is a tool that I started kind of experimenting with fairly recently. I can't say I've used it long enough to kind of be able to articulate it song and verse. But what I really like about what the tool does in theory is, I think it can expedite that time towards collecting that information and doing the research and getting a quick view around what's important within an account. And of course, you guys through the AI also can provide some suggestions and recommendations. And so it's a long-winded way of saying that almost the old school is doing the homework, doing the research. But, especially as what we do here at Lacework, the heartbeat of it is AI centric. I'm a big fan of trying to leverage technology to drive a better return on your time. And so the direction of travel for OneShot, I think, is great for the market.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah. And like on that personalization and channels, I know we talked about LinkedIn, you find your contacts, and, you're in a security space. Security is, notoriously a competitive industry. Lots of different software vendors. Lacework have got phenomenal products, great technology, but it's hard to get through that, competitive noise. How do you have any like ways to like differentiate? People out there are listening to this thinking so many different types of products do the same things these days, and our buyers are hearing it all the time. Is there like a way of trying to cut through the noise of other sellers, or is it just a numbers game, I guess, sometimes?
Yeah, I think it starts with, you've got to be, first of all, very clear about where the unique differentiation is and how you can defend against it, so to speak. But, I know it might sound trivial, but I think you've really got to truly believe it and embody it.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself sometimes is the differentiator. If I come on here and have this conversation with you and I say, hey, we got this pretty cool thing, Lacework's pretty good, and it's a good new security tool, versus Lacework is absolutely the most transformative next generation cloud. So, the energy, the vigor that I bring to that massively changes how you feel about it. That comes through in your messaging, your calls, everything of that nature. And so whenever I work for a company, I've absolutely got to believe in it. I've got to back the tech. And so I almost think it starts with that versus any kind of secret sales process or way of going about things.
Yeah, completely. I think any company I've joined in the past, you've got to buy in at the interview stage, right? Like, do you believe in the tech? Do you believe in the company? Do you believe in the people, the market? And if you believe in that, it's like, okay, I was thinking there's another good way of, it's like, what about from a seller? If I was a buyer, would I buy this? What are the things how does it differentiate? It's another good way. Yeah, one thing I'm super interested about, we speak to a lot of prospectors, SDRs. You're obviously in a later stage of your career in an enterprise role. So you've got to balance prospecting, building pipeline, whilst also managing complex deals. And anyone who's closed complex deals knows they can be incredibly stressful. Doesn't matter how much you've qualified it, there's always things that come up, curveballs that come up. How do you balance, like let's just take a really extreme example. Let's take quarter end. You're in the final month of the quarter, you've got maybe 2-3 deals you're trying to close out. How do you balance still trying to build pipeline whilst dealing with complex enterprise deals? Is there anything you do? Do you stop prospecting? Do you reduce it? Do you still? It'll be really good to understand that process.
Yeah, sure. First of all, it's a great question, right? And I think that the first mantra I'll say is never stop prospecting. And so, the mentality has always got to be that, that journey of PG never ends, right? Quarter end or otherwise. The thing that I've become really focused on, is how can I, as I say, always, how can I drive the best ROI on my time? And part of that is thinking about what are my scaling mechanisms. And so when it comes to PG, how can I scale me? How can I, add some more arms to my bow to drive that same outcome? One of those is, if you're fortunate enough to have an SDR and SDR team, that becomes important. What training, coaching, enablement can I do to put my SDR or the team that I'm working with there in the best possible position to maximize their results? Have you got a channel team? Are there partnerships that you can build? Is there automations that you can leverage to do some more work for you while you sleep? And is there a particular hour in every single day that you can carve out and commit to PG, whether it's, quarter end or the beginning of a month or otherwise? And so all of these things become really important, as well as obsessing about the outcomes and the target. So between the SDR that I collaborate with, we just have this mantra that we don't miss. And every other day, we just on Slack have a message saying, right, we've got to do this, we don't miss. And this week alone, I had 3 days out of the office because of QBRs and meetings and things like that. So we had 2 days to meet and exceed that number. And we just said to each other, we don't miss. So it's the mentality combined with those scaling mechanisms that are going to define whether you make it or not.
Yeah, I love it. I almost want to start doing some PG now. But I think the key point you've mentioned there is that it's that mindset and the discipline. It's easy enough to just okay, I've done enough. Yeah, I had a deal come in. This is stressing me out. But having that discipline, it's the same as having the discipline to exercise, eat right. It's the same thing with prospecting. It's you get it in, if you do it, it's good for you, and the results will kick in as well.
Yes.
Final couple of questions here. One thing, you build your own pipeline, you close your own deals, you work for a great organization, so you get inbound as well. One thing I always like to understand, being a seller myself, is how do you feel difference-wise when you close a deal? Do you feel the same when you close a deal that you've hunted yourself, you prospected, versus an inbound deal? Do you think there's a difference in how you feel when you compare those two types of deals?
Personally, I think there is definitely a difference, but almost to take a half step backwards, part of how I can relate to this in a almost slightly different way is going from, Twilio at ground zero to AWS, which is arguably, it's the most successful cloud computing company on the planet, i.e. half your job's kind of done for you in a certain way because people know who you are, and then kind of coming back to Lacework where back to ground zero, no one really knows who you are. And so I think today I feel less differential whether, say, someone from the SDR team or it's an inbound or me, because we're just in the trenches, right? Raising market awareness, trying to make it happen. We're not able to walk in with a kind of badge of honor, which does at least builds part of that trust bridge. And I actively chose that environment. I chose to be uncomfortable. I chose to put myself back into the fire to go out there and make it happen because I love it and I thrive in it. And so, yeah, probably less different now because I'm just in the trenches, but definitely in previous roles where a lot of maybe the market awareness was already there. I can't say that feeling was as strong when I won something. It was a felt a little bit more cruise control for me, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah. And final question, right? In terms of performance, you've worked at some great teams, right? Twilio, Lacework team, AWS, you know, these are some of the best organizations there. So you've been working alongside some of the best sales leaders, SDRs, AEs. What traits do you see? If you can think of like, okay, who was the top rep, top SDR at those companies, top leader? Is there like one or two things you continually see in these types of people that you've seen at these organizations?
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm going to say a couple of words again that we probably hear so much that it starts to become a little bit of an over the head. But I've honestly seen a massive difference between the way people execute against their discipline and their consistency, right? And the elite performers don't just hear those words as words. In a way, they obsess over and hold themselves truly accountable to those two words. I often say that success is inevitable if you're willing to do the work over an extended period of time. And what I find is that, you know, you've got the elite 1%, and that elite 1% are extremely hungry, they're extremely motivated, but they're consistent and very disciplined against the activities that are going to drive the right outcomes, right? And then everyone else kind of just wakes up and lets the day happen, right? They wake up and it's, you know, let me open my emails and look at my calendar, and I've filtered my way through, and did I hit my weekly target? Yes. No. It's all up here, right? And to me, it's a choice. You know, you wake up and you go out there and you get after it, or you don't. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but either you choose the greatness and legacy, or you just choose to fit in.
Yeah,
that's the decision.
Love it. I think you've nailed it there. It is that consistency and discipline. It's that ability to do, and some people might even class it's boring, right? Because it's doing the same thing over and over again. But actually, that's where like the magic happens. It's by doing that and executing on a day-by-day basis. And I said final question. I've got one more because you led me to that. Yeah, when we look at metrics, and you've kind of said like hitting my targets, are there any like key metrics you hold yourself accountable to, or you work in a team that you kind of think, okay, is it like reach out to 5 people a day, 10 cold calls a week, or something like that, you know, that are important metrics to you that you look at, even if it's on your personal life or your work life? It'll be good to understand that piece.
Yeah, I'm big on activity and finding as quickly as possible my formula for success. So joining a new business, in the first 30, 60 days, I'm obsessing over what is my formula here. And so I just go pretty crazy with the outbound, all of the activities that I know are revenue generating in some way. And I also speak to as many people as I can in the organization who's become elite at all of the areas that are going to be really important to my success. And then I bring all of that together, and then I'm very clear around what metrics are going to drive what outcomes. So now I'm confident enough to know that every 100 times I pick up the phone, I'm going to have 2 meetings booked. So what does that mean? I'm going to go and deliver against that. You know, and in every other aspect of my business, I've got the formula and the metrics that can drive predictability in the outcomes that I need to make. And so this week, for example, where I told you I was out for 3 days, we've already hit the target, because I knew what it was going to take. I had 2 days to do it, which meant that the output had to increase, but I knew what it was going to take to still make sure that I was able to achieve against expectation.
Brilliant, brilliant. I love it. I think it's key to those, having that. And it means that you don't get overwhelmed, because some people you'll see out there will be just like, I just need to do as much as possible all the time. And so with that mindset, they're always behind, because they don't know what they're aiming for. No, appreciate it. And Alex, thank you like so much for today. I'm following you on LinkedIn. I just love the daily post you're doing around what you're doing in the field. I think like there's a lot of people on LinkedIn who'll be talking about these things, but they're not active in the field. They're not living it. So I think by doing that, so if anyone's listening or watching, follow Alex on LinkedIn. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I pretty much live on there outside of my day job. And, you know, I really hope this is insightful to others in some way. So I really appreciate the time.
Brilliant. Thank you.